Hello, Cleveland, and welcome back to another edition of the Dogland Podcast. I am your host, Jackson McCurry, and joining me once again is Jack Duffin. Jack, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. No, really enjoying it. We're sort of the penultimate offensive room. We're coming up to the halfway point. It's exciting. It's been really, really fun time of the year where you can really rack your brain and be like, what are we going to do? What are the different options? And no, I've enjoyed it. It's good fun.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're into February now, which means we're getting closer to free agency, the combine, and I'm using air quotes when I say that's at the end of the month. So we're starting to ramp up, getting closer to the off season now. As we're recording, this morning there's a rumor that our defensive line coach is up for the Packers defensive coordinator job. I'll have more on that on the dogland.com. Probably Wednesday morning when this also drops as well. We're continuing our deep dive into the Browns roster. We're going to focus on offensive tackles today, that position group. But before we get into that, the last time we recorded was last Friday. We did the tight end episode. Well, Monday was the tight end episode. But before that, there was a blockbuster trade in the NFL over the weekend. The Detroit Lions and the Los Angeles Rams did a QB swap, and there was draft picks involved. Matthew Stafford, who's been with the Lions since they drafted him in 2009, gets traded to the Rams for Jared Goff, 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick. So the much hype QB shuffle that Adam Schefter teased a couple weeks ago, starting to get the ball rolling with that big trade. And now we're going to wait and see what happens with Deshaun Watson. Of course, the draft, obviously there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks there and much other veterans could be on the move. But Jack, quick thoughts on the major trade over the weekend.
Yeah, so firstly, it's one of them that you see the headline 2 firsts and a third. And usually when you see these trades, it's a first, and then that third year is the third. But this is actually the opposite way around. So if we're going to sort of value it based on the trade picks, it's worth doing what teams do and almost bringing that pick forward a year. So next round, a 2022 first to teams is a second this year. A 2023 first would be a third this year in terms of that value. So if you're looking at it from that angle, you're saying, hey, it's a second and 2/3 from sort of a sort of 2021 trade value, which isn't actually as crazy as it sounds. Obviously, Detroit Lions, they're happy to have the value in the future because they're looking for a longer rebuild. So it's really a win there. Whereas a second and 2/3, and effectively, if we're looking at it, it's the third and the next round's first for Stafford, and the other first round pick, that's just for getting rid of Jared Goff. So that's something you should sort of keep in mind. Jared Goff yet to play a snap on his new deal. Carson Wentz yet to play a snap on his new deal. Those are the last 2 big name QBs to get signed and sort of come up to start playing this year, and they're both sort of their teams would like to get rid of them, which is crazy when you think they're the 2 headline names. And that's sort of news that, yeah, Browns fans, they're really positive on Baker and should be. When you say there's also a big area of doubt, you don't know what a player is going to be like in 2 years' time. You've got sort of 2/3 of a year of really good stuff in his rookie year. You've got a year of it wasn't as bad as lots of people make it out last year. It was just sort of average. And then you've got a third of a season of dire, and then 2/3 of a season of amazing. And it's literally like the 2 ends of the spectrum. So from that perspective, where I've been going, actually, we might want to wait another year. You don't want to be giving up a first round pick to get rid of Baker Mayfield in 2 years' time. So, yeah, if he's willing to take the COVID reduction, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, do it. It's worth it. Whereas there's no harm in waiting. And then Stafford, the sort of this roster building strategy of let's give up 2 first round picks and get star defensive players. You've got Ramsey, you've got Khalil Mack. None of these guys make a difference. And that might be harsh to sort of people saying, oh, but look at the Bears. The Bears have got an elite defense. Elite defenses are unstable. From year to year, they're not great. PFF's Eric Eager's done a piece saying it's about your overall talent. So the spots on the defense that generally make the most difference is your 5th to 7th best defender. It's not actually your 1 and 2. The biggest difference makers are 5th to 7, because the reason for that is if you've got talent all the way down to 7, you've probably got a good defense. You can get pass rush. You've got good coverage. And coverage is very much a sum of the parts. You need everyone to be good in coverage, because one elite like Ramsey, it shuts down one guy, but then you've got an elite wide receiver on the other side. You're getting absolutely destroyed. It doesn't matter that you've shut down wide receiver 1, because teams have got 3 of them. So it's one where it's bad roster building. You need that constant young talent, and people will point to it and go, oh, but they've got 4 or 5 good players in the later rounds the last few years. Don't really matter. Lots of this stuff swings around in roundabouts. You look at the Saints class a few years ago, what had it been 4 years ago. So your Marshawn Lattimore, your Ryan Ramczyk, Kamara, I think there was a few others. I think that was all in the same class, where everyone was like, oh, these guys are phenomenal. They can draft like that every year. What happened? It didn't. It doesn't stay that way. So drafting's more luck than anything. You get ups, you get downs, and a lot of it then comes down to development, etc. So it's bad roster building. If you don't have an elite QB, there's no reason you should ever go all in. And I think the reason's been made because Lead knows if they don't make the playoffs next year, he's getting fired. So quite frankly, he's up for getting rid of first-round picks in 2-3 years' time, the same way Bill O'Brien was, because it's not their problem. And I think that's where owners should be smarter and go, I'm going to actually get rid of you now. Because if you want to sacrifice the future of my franchise to try save your job for the next year, then that's probably not the GM you want. So I think they're going down a line where in 2-3 years' time, we're going to be talking about, are they in a worse position the Houston Texans are in now? And the difference is the Houston Texans actually have a quarterback. Stafford, he's just slightly above league average.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the debate that myself, you, and Anthony had Monday night about this was very fascinating, talking about, the Rams, how aggressive they are when it comes to, trading these first-round picks. They haven't had one since 2016 when they moved up to take Jared Goff. Les Snead is an aggressive GM, and I also think Sean McVay is an aggressive head coach, so I feel like they're willing to throw their chips in. Yeah, it's hurt them in some aspects. They extended Goff and Gurley, only to cut Gurley and now trade Goff. But, you look at, they haven't had first-round picks. They have found talent. I know, like you said, the Saints had a great draft class, and now it's kind of meh. We said the same thing about the Browns after 2018. They did find Baker, Chubb, and Denzel in that draft, and then Jannard Avery was productive. Callaway was productive, and those two are either at the bottom of a roster or out of the league. I mean, yeah, draft classes change year from year about how good or how bad they are. It's crazy, but I like that, we're going to finally see how good Matthew Stafford is. He's always put up great numbers in Detroit, but the thing is with Detroit, they've been just as bad of an organization as the Browns have been. Hopefully they're on the trending upward in terms of being a good organization, but Detroit never put a solid offensive line in front of Stafford. I heard in all the career games he's had, 11 times has he had a 100-yard rusher to lean on. They've had great receivers, but their defense, they've had one top 10 defense during his whole career. I mean, Stafford's had to carry the load big time in Detroit. Now he's going to what appears to be a good team. They've been a playoff team last couple years in LA. They're going to have to retool the offensive line with Whitworth retiring more than likely. They do have a running game. They have Woods and Kupp. Their defense is good, but they're going to lose some pieces this offseason. They're going to have to make changes because of the shrinking salary cap. So it's going to be fascinating. And then also on the Detroit side, who's to say they keep Jared Goff? They had the 7th pick in the draft. They could flip Goff because I think people were calling about Jared Goff's services before they made this trade. So who's to say they don't flip Goff for another draft asset and move up to try to get one of these quarterbacks in the draft?
I would love it. If they flip Goff, even if they end up eating some of the contracts, it wouldn't surprise me if they go, actually, we're going to eat 10 million of this, 15, 20. It doesn't really matter, because if they're going into a rebuild, then they can eat that money. And I think a smart team would go, let's go for a draft pick at 7 or trade back. And Mitchell Trubisky, however, I have been absolutely slandering that man for 4 years. And if you ever listen to the show, he'd probably be crying. But I think that sort of quarterback is a really smart way of, let's say, look, there is talent in there with Mitchell Trubisky. Has any team got it out? No. Is it probably ever going to come out? No. But I would bet more on that upside. If you can eat a little bit of money from Goff and get a second round pick for Goff, and then you're trading him off, you're then bringing in someone else, you're trading back from your pick at 7, you can suddenly start getting there to, let's have 7 first-round picks over 3 years. You see what the Browns have done, you see what the Miami Dolphins have done, and you go, actually, we're going to have a lot of talent. You could be the other end, Houston Texans, if they trade off Watson, 10 first-round picks in 3 years, that offense and that whole team's going to be really, really good. You're going to have trouble when you come to re-sign it, because 10 first-round picks, you'd expect, say, 5 of them to hit. They all want big deals. You can't afford them all. But I'd rather have so much talent that you're like, hey, let's flip this guy for a first-round pick. We can't keep him. It's a great, fun place to be.
Yeah, if Detroit is talking long-term rebuild, and their new head coach, Dan Campbell, was kind of hinting at that in interviews he's done, having Jared Goff there, even though he's guaranteed, I think, $43 million per year the next 2 seasons, it just doesn't seem like a natural fit. I mean, unless they're going to draft a quarterback this year and groom him behind Goff, which that doesn't make any sense either, at least to me. I mean, I could be totally off on this, but I could totally see a scenario if a team calls, and the Indianapolis Colts seem to come to mind, even though I don't really want any AFC teams continuing to upgrade, especially when the Browns are in their window. But the Colts seem like a perfect team for him. Their GM seems very aggressive into making moves. They need a quarterback, obviously, with Phillip Rivers retiring, and they have the assets to go out and get Goff. So that would be something to watch for sure.
He was the team that I thought he suits best, Stafford, because the Colts are a team where they've got loads of great players, very few amazing players. They're just like above average everywhere. It's a really good roster. It's a really fun roster. But you don't look at that team and go, that's a superstar. You've got Darius Leonard, very good player. You've got Pittman, I think, very good player. You've probably got Quentin Nelson's their only superstar, and it's a guard. It's not really something you're going to get excited about and a game changer. So putting someone like Stafford there, I think is genuinely, that takes you to we're competing for the Super Bowl, we're competing for a playoff team, to we're going to win a playoff game. And once you get to the playoffs and you win one game, you may as well just flip a coin. We saw what happened with the Browns this year. We're close to going through again, and lots of it comes down to luck and things like that. So yeah, by all means, just become a team that we're going to make the playoffs every year. Not we hope to make the playoffs every year. We're going to make the playoffs every year. That's the goal for every team. And yeah, if they give up a first round pick and they get Stafford for the next few years, that should be a really interesting team to watch.
You mean Goff, not Stafford?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to the offseason deep dive. We're going to focus on offensive tackles on this episode. This is our 5th installment of the series. If anybody hasn't listened or read, go to thedogland.com, look back at our archive. We've covered quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends so far. Jack, when you look at the offensive tackle position, the Browns are set, at least for this year, maybe even next year. When you broke down the rosters, every NFL team has 9 offensive linemen, and you usually expect around 4 to be offensive tackles. So the Browns have 2 already. They just need some depth. But when you look at this position, how do you feel about it going into the future for the Browns?
Yeah, so set up really nice as we go back to the buzzword from Andrew Berry. We talk about sequencing. So you've got Jedrick Wills, got 3 more cheap years. And then we've got sort of a reasonable year, which will be the 5th year option. And fingers crossed, we're in a position where we put that in. So in terms of his play, he was a sort of just average. There was nothing special from his rookie year, and that's perfectly fine. We wrote about that a whole year ago, saying, hey, going into the season around May, I thought, let's look at him. What are we expecting from his rookie year? And not that many guys wow in year 1. So it was like, let's just get what we wanted. I was a bit of a worth lover, not going to lie. We didn't get him, but that's perfectly fine. It was sort of who do they like most projecting to left tackle, and Callahan was involved. And unless you're Dante Scarnecchia, I'm taking Callahan's opinion over everyone. So it's one that I think it's going to be an exciting development, and he should be here for the long term. So we've got another 4 years of him. Then we'll probably extend him, give him sort of a 4-year deal. So yeah, he's probably going to be the left tackle for, let's say, 10 years. So there's not really much to add more when it comes to Jedrick Wills.
Yeah, definitely. I was a Tristan Wirfs guy just like you. I remember on draft night, they turned the card in so quickly, and I thought, okay, they're taking Tristan Wirfs. We've been talking about this for months. It seems like this is going to be the lock pick. They took Wills, and I was like, you know what? I'm okay with this because, him coming from Alabama, he knows how to protect the QB's blind side because with Tua being a left-handed quarterback, Jedrick was protecting his blind side as the right tackle. So and there was concern definitely going into camp just because there was no offseason programs. But, when we have a guy like Bill Callahan who has coached so many great offensive linemen throughout his coaching career, I thought, there'd be hiccups. He was going to be average, and that's what he was. Wills was going to be an average left tackle, very durable. I mean, he did end up missing the Kansas City game, hurt on the first play, but guy was good. He made his mistakes, but, I feel confident, just like you, that he's going to be our long-term left tackle, barring any serious injuries or anything. So, yeah, I mean, he was good, and I expect him, like you said, like you wrote in your article, to develop into an above-average starting tackle for years to come.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to piece together, and we discussed it before, of sort of where does the sort of long-term veterans place on the offense around Baker. I'd be surprised if there's not a time when they've always got to tackle on sort of one of them big deals. So opposite side, we've obviously got Jack Conklin, who's come in and performed as, for PFF, the best right tackle in the NFL last year. He was 8th overall in tackles. But obviously the key thing was him. It wasn't could he play. Everyone knew that. It was, is he going to remain healthy, which fingers crossed he did. We've got 2 years left on that deal. So it wouldn't surprise me if they try and get one more year out of him and then go, look, you've got 1 year left. We've got another, at that stage, 3 cheaper years left of Wills. Can we peg 2 more onto the back of your 1 year remaining? Or they might be cheeky and try have sort of 1 year where they're paying Conklin and Wills. Just if they backload it and go almost, give us 3 more years, give us 2 more years. So it wouldn't surprise me if Conklin potentially gets that another deal here. He's not going to be here long term. We're not talking he is going to be here for another 5 years because they could. The reason why they could is if Wills doesn't match up to what we hope Wills is going to be. But they're only going to pay 1 tackle long term. And it's why when people are talking about the Jets should grab Penny Sewell, they'd be stupid because it's going to be fun for 4 years. But when you have to pay one of the guys, the other guy's not staying here. They're never going to pay both of their tackles and then have no wide receivers. So it's one, the transition is so nice. If Wills develops into what we want, then Conklin can ride off into the sunset, maybe get 3 extra years here, but that transition is already set in place. If Wills isn't what we want, you keep Conklin a bit longer and you can draft another offensive tackle in 2 years' time. So, it's a really nice transition. They've got 3 years to decide, hey, what is Jedrick Wills? So in 2 years' time, we'll know, is Wills the guy, which we all hope he is. If not, draft one again, give Conklin another 3 years, keep on rolling.
Yeah, I mean, Conklin, I think this was prize free agent signing last year because, everybody was saying the Browns should go get him. But then you heard the rumors he's going to cost $20 million a year. He's looking for, who's the tackle in Houston? Tunsil money. And I don't even think Tunsil had been signed yet, but there was rumors that he was going to get that much and Conklin was going to ask for that much. We signed him, it was the biggest surprise, I think, of free agency. But, he was a great addition. Him and Teller both, elevating the entire offensive line as well as drafting Wills. But, him being here, obviously, he's here for the next couple of seasons, like you said. Hopefully, by that time, we know what Wills is going to be. We hope Wills is going to be this good. I feel like under the guidance of Callahan as well as the veterans surrounding him that Wills will be good. And then at that point, you pay him. If they can get Conklin to stay here, take a little bit of a pay cut. He's still fairly young. He could probably score another big money contract here in a couple years, but it would be nice to keep him around as well somehow. Keep some kind of foundation, a nucleus on that offensive front. But you're going to run into a situation like Dallas where, they paid all their linemen. And then once it was time to pay Zeke and Amari, and hopefully Dak will get his money from them too soon, they can't afford their offensive line. And that's obviously that might happen to the Browns at some point. And that just means that we have a quarterback. We got guys on offense that we need to keep that are more important than the offensive line. But yeah, you keep Conklin for here the next couple of years, then you see what happens. But he's definitely the starting right tackle for at least the next few seasons.
Yeah, and it's one of them where you're sat in there and you probably potentially in a year's time, as crazy as it might sound, you might go, look, let's spend a first round pick on an offensive tackle in next year's draft. And people go, well, why would you do that? And the reason is you've then got an amazing third tackle because injuries are going to happen. You've then got someone who's going to step up straight away. And the other part is you're then, if Wills has sort of a bad third year, if Conklin, you decide actually we're going to let him go, potentially you're getting a third, fourth round comp pick in free agency. So you're getting free money back. It puts you in a really, really nice position, but you've got lots of options, and options are the key thing. Sequencing, flexibility, they're all sorts of things you'll hear. So, no, I really, really like where the Browns are at with their tackles. You've got two guys that are really good, and you can't pay everyone, so it's just kind of what happens.
Yeah, focusing now on the depth. I mean, the Browns do have Chris Hubbard, at least for one more season. I remember a year ago at this time, me and Anthony, and maybe even you, we were all just like, oh, Hubbard's going to get cut. We might hold on to him for camp, use him as trade bait potentially. But lo and behold, this dude was, he was our sixth lineman. And when a guy went down up until, the point where Hubbard got hurt, Hubbard stepped in and played quite well. PFF ranked him as the 11th ranked guard in the league this year, which, I mean, is a testament to Hubbard, who put in the work, obviously, to get ready to play in this type of scheme, but also the coaching staff, right back to Bill Callahan and his assistants on the offensive line staff. Hubbard was great. And, they're paying him, was it $3.75 million for this year? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, so he's already got some dead money that's sat there. So regardless if you keep him or get rid of him, you're paying him that, and that's there from last year as sort of a signing bonus. But effectively, yeah, you've got a decision to make of him. Do you keep him and pay him $3.75 million, or do you walk away? You probably, yeah, I might be able to trade him off, because if he's the 11th best guard, the team's probably going to look there and go, if we bring him in, he can start for us for 1 year, or we could potentially look at a rework deal, and he could, maybe you go, look, we don't want to give you loads of money. We're going to give you $15 million over 3 years. Or maybe slightly more than that, 17.5 over 3 years. We want you to play as a guard. We're not going to pay you massive money, but at your age, take it. And I think it'd be mad not to turn that down if someone that, it would look like an easy cut candidate that wouldn't really get much going into next year. If someone's going to offer him 3 year, $5 million a year deal, I think he'd put pen to paper. Yeah,
but I would think, at least for now, they'll probably keep him. I mean, I know that, they don't like to pay for depth, but I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a guy that can stand and play either tackle or guard. And I mean, it looked like he was better as a guard this year when we needed him, when Teller went down. It doesn't hurt to have a guy that could play both positions and step up and continue to play at a high level. Now, he might want to go play elsewhere, go somewhere where he can start, but I mean, he's been in Cleveland for a couple of years. He's seen the team at its lowest, and he's seen the team now on the rise. Like, he might want to stick around and be a part of this as long as he can. So, I mean, he restructured his deal once. I don't think it's possible to restructure it again just because he's on a 1 year deal. They'd have to extend him, and I don't think that's an option. But I would keep him unless a team comes calling and offers him a draft pick that they just can't turn down. I feel like Hubbard has found a role here, and is obviously performing at a high level with it.
Yeah, I think it's certainly one way you can go. Let's keep him here for one more year. He's not a game changer, but he's just solid. And yeah, I think the route is to keep him. And if you've got loads of sort of developmental guys and other options behind him, there's no harm in doing that. This is the year probably to go, look, Chris Hubbard's on more than we like, but we'll leave him here for 1 year, give us injury cover. And we'll get onto it in a second, have sort of a really nice offensive tackle at number 4. Let's have a good guard that we'll be chatting about on Friday and go, look, we've got the depth sorted. Now, if someone goes down, we can allow Hubbard to move on. We've got enough pieces. So I think that's the route. Obviously, if you were going wild and the Browns were up against the cap, you'd be sitting here going, let's do something crazy like we can't pay Bitonio $10 million anymore. We've got a $3.75 million guard. Luckily, the Browns have got salary cap space, because if we were right up against the cap, we're looking at sort of what some of these teams like the Saints, the Falcons, that would unfortunately have to be a decision you're making. And when people go, you can't get rid of X player, when you're 30, 40 million over the cap, everyone's on the table, and a player with no guarantees is in that. So it wouldn't surprise me, if we say, let's keep him here. He's penciled in, but he gets moved during the draft in camp. I think just because he makes it through free agency with the Browns, that's no guaranteed future here. Because if someone impresses in camp, you're either going to cut him or you're going to trade him. And I think, you'll get a good trade package, especially if someone loses a guard. If someone's guard goes down, potentially Joel Bitonio or Teller go down. And he's a starter then for the entire season. It can happen.
There will be no suggesting of them trading Joel Bitonio, because I just bought a $100 jersey a month ago, and I'm letting that curse die, Jack. So that's not going to happen.
No, it was just in case.
No, I know.
If you are 40 million over, if they're comfortable with him performing at a top 12 guard in the NFL, going, Joel Bitonio is number 3 guard. Are we getting 90% production out of a player on 40% of pay? Yeah, I think you might be able to argue that. Can he keep it up? No, that's a whole other question that they might be able to answer. But no, luckily, Sashi's cap space keeps Joel Bitonio around.
So as we, hypothetically, we're going to say Wills and Conklin are definitely here, and we'll just say Hubbard's going to be here. So now we look at the 4th offensive tackle position. They have Alex Taylor, who is someone that they signed as an undrafted free agent last year. Seemed to like him a lot. They called him up, or they protected him, but he never really played. So I feel like, this could be a guy for the future. This could also be a guy they cut in 2 weeks' time. You just don't know how they truly feel about Alex Taylor. They also have Drake Dorbeck currently on the roster, who opted out because of COVID reasons last year. So we never even saw him or what he could potentially be. But that 4th offensive tackle spot is completely up for grabs. They can go a number of directions. They could bring back Kendall Lamb. They could sign another free agent. They could also draft someone. So this is definitely the wild card spot when you're looking at the offensive tackle position.
Yeah, so Alex Taylor, I think, in all the articles I've wrote, is the player that, just the weirdest almost, they obviously really like him, but at the same time, they waived him, allowed anyone in the NFL to get a hold of him, and then brought him back. They called him up several times, so it was like, they're going to give him a shot. And then they gave players a shot that had literally just rocked up. Michael Dunn, is it? No, Blake Hans, who turned up on the day of the game, introduced himself to Baker in the locker room, and then started ahead of Alex Taylor. Not started, but played ahead, and he was active, whereas Alex Taylor wasn't. So it's very much the upside that they must love. They're obviously not happy with where he's at the moment. Hopefully in this offseason, whatever the problem is that they see there, he can overcome that, because this 4th spot, if they're keeping Hubbard at number 3, they're not bringing in a free agent here. This is all about upside because they need to groom someone that next season can be OT3. Hopefully, the ambition would be this is someone that can be your right tackle in 2 years' time. So you're looking at, we want a player, and that's why I think it'll probably be in the draft. Might be Alex Taylor, where they go, look, even if it's a third round, a fourth rounder, let's pick this guy. We're going to ask him to be OT4 this year. We're going to ask him to be OT3 next year. And then the year after, when Conklin's deal expires, hopefully that person can start. Obviously, that's a big ask for a third, fourth, fifth round pick. But you never know. There might be someone they like. Obviously, Callahan's shown he can develop guys. Alex Taylor could be that guy. But it might be a case that they go with that plan and suddenly by the end of camp, they're like, this guy is the nuts. He's phenomenal. We've taken him in the fourth round. We really, really like him. Right, Hubbard, you've got traded. We're going to go into the season with this fourth round pick. Alex Taylor, we still love you. You just keep working your craft. And then suddenly you've got two young guys. So, no, I think we're definitely going to see a day 3 pick at tackle if they find someone they like. Obviously, I don't know the draft. There might be tackle prospects they like, but we've seen that there's plenty always come out as long as you've got the coaching staff to develop them, and we most certainly do.
Without a doubt. And it's nice, think back to 2 years ago at this time where Desmond Harrison was our left tackle and Chris Hubbard was our right tackle, and it was just like, oh, well, we don't need the line was good the last day. Or no, it was Greg Robinson, but Desmond Harrison was still in the cards. Everybody's like, no, our offensive line's okay. And then Freddie took over the offense completely, and it just went to shambles. So it's nice that we've turned the corner in terms of that. We've found our hopeful long-term left tackle, a solid right tackle that'll be here for a couple years. And we had some nice depth in 2020, and it'll be interesting to see what they do to continue that solid depth going into 2021.
Yeah, and just to sort of prepare Browns fans for the draft, we're going to start drafting a year in advance. So don't get angry and start throwing things at the TV because you're like, we don't need that guy. As we discussed, I think it was last episode, if you take a first-round pick on offense, our offense is that good, they're not going to start day one. And that's a great thing. That's not a bad thing if you suddenly draft someone in the first round, because the roster's that loaded. You're looking at basically every pick, day 2, day 3, that this guy is there as a development, more or less going to sit for the whole year or not be a starter, depending on, is it a rotational piece like an edge or a D-line, or is it a you start or you don't like a tackle. So don't go crazy that, oh, why have they done this? We don't need this guy. We don't really need anything in lots of spaces. In free agency, we can fill some of these holes on defense that we'll get to. Needs are basically not going to be a thing in the draft. It's about drafting that year ahead. Give yourself lots of options. Have that long-term plan of going, look, let's take this guy in the third round. Here's the plan for him over the next 2 years. It might not work out and we might get rid of him in a year's time. That's perfectly fine. But we're going to keep just driving more talent. And that's something I'm really, really excited about, that we could be genuinely talking about. We've got 40 promising players on this roster after this season, which you might think, oh, you need 53. The Browns roster a couple of years ago had about 15 promising players on it. If we're talking about 40, that is a testament to the work everyone's been doing within the building. So, no, it's really, really nice position. There is loads of talent. And if we can start getting excited about an Alex Taylor stepping up and replacing Hubbard potentially in this offseason, it's a big win, because that's another $3 million that you go, actually, let's spend that on a starting slot corner, and you can get a starter level player for that $3 million. So you might go, let's move on Chris Hubbard and let's bring in Mike Hilton, that's going to play 90% of snaps. It's a win-wins, but it relies on good drafting, good scouting, and good coaching and development.
Absolutely. And I feel like, it's been one season. I feel like we are heading in the right direction in all three departments. So looking forward to seeing what the future holds for the Browns. We'll be back Friday as we cap off the offensive side of the roster deep dive with the interior part of the offensive line. Jack, go ahead and plug everything you've got going, especially with this great deep dive.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter. It's at Jack Duffin, Duffin. Thank you for everyone that's reached out. Really enjoyed whether it's chatting on Twitter, whether it's chatting in the DMs. They're open. Can answer any of your cap questions. There's going to be loads coming up over the next 2-3 years, especially with the COVID stuff. But with everything Browns, we're suddenly like, how do we squeeze a couple more dollars out, do this or do that? We're going to be there pretty close soon. But no, happy to answer questions, always get involved. Obviously, all the writings at the Dogland, podcasts are at the Paul Brown Podcast, but you'll be able to find that all on Twitter. Any questions, keep asking them, because I'll be starting like Q&A style stuff once we get through the rest of the deep dive. But yeah, more coming at you. Go check out the articles. They've been really, really fun to write.
As always, you can follow me on Twitter at JackMcCurry08. Check out the Dogland on Twitter and Facebook at the Dogland. And until next time, which will be Friday when we break down the interior offensive line, go Browns.